Tune in.
Tune in.
Tune in.
It's the power of the game.
It's the power of the game.
It's the Power of the Game podcast by Golf Saudi.
Hello and welcome along to another episode of the Power of the Game podcast with myself, Robbie Greenfield. My guest in this episode is the CEO of the Ladies European Tour. Her name is Alex Armas, and this has been a really interesting couple of years for both women's golf, their relationship with Golf Saudi and the Ladies European Tour in particular. We've seen recently a massive announcement take place, the Aramco Team Series, which is going to span 4 different countries, culminating in Saudi Arabia. It's going to travel to New York, to London, to Singapore. It'll finish at the Royal Greens Golf Club just north of Jeddah. And each of those events in a team format is going to boast a $1 million purse. Huge momentum for both women's golf and the Ladies European Tour. And that was one of the key things that I wanted to discuss with Alex during this podcast. She comes from a very interesting background. She started as a player. She spent 4 years playing on the tour. And then she went into the administrative side of things, and she's now leading a new vision for the future of both the Ladies European Tour and helping to contribute to a much more healthier and prosperous future for ladies golf in general. Let's get straight to it then. I caught up with Alex and I had to ask her how that transition from being a professional golfer went for her in those early years as she graduated to a position on the Ladies European Tour.
Yeah, so from my perspective, my journey in golf started, I guess, as for many people through. I did a lot of sport. I enjoyed doing sport as a kid. I was playing a lot of tennis, and then golf became popular, and so then my parents transitioned from playing tennis into golf, and that's obviously dragged the children along, and that's how I got started, and then from there. I met a very good group of friends of my age, 10, 11-year-olds. And for the next, 6, 7, 8 years until we left, we became, and we're still very much friends, but that was kind of my gang. And we used to hang out at the golf course. And that's what we would do every weekend. We were let go at the golf course. And I mean, I think that's, a good message from my experience in making golf courses family friendly, how important that is and how helpful it is to bring new families and new people into the game. Because it's a very family friendly sport and it allows itself, but if you have all these restrictions for kids and you have to be here or there or you can't play, then it just prevents their parents from also playing. So that was my experience. That was my playground growing up. And then I showed some promise and started playing in the club team, then played for Spain for many, many years, went to college on a golf scholarship, and continued with my studies and all of that. And then at one stage, decided to also give playing pro a chance, and I was on the Ladies European Tour.
And what was that like? Was that a straightforward process, getting onto the tour and actually gaining your playing rights for that LET season?
My journey was slightly different to maybe a lot of players that were coming off, their kind of amateur, playing top level amateur golf. I quit golf after college. I got an economics degree and did my master's degree. And so I stopped playing for 2 years. And it was only when I started commuting into London to do the real world stuff that I thought, I'm not sure I'm quite ready. Not sure I'm quite ready for this yet.
I give golf another crack.
Yeah, I might just pull out those golf clubs again and see how that goes. So I pretty much handed in my thesis and went to Q school that week, the following week, and it was just on the kind of the idea of like, I'm going to go. If I get my card, I'll give it a try. If not, then okay, I guess I'll have to stick to the real world. And luckily, I managed to get my card and played on tour, and it was an amazing experience. Something that
You must have had a heck of a lot of talent, Alex, just to kind of like on a whim, just go, you know what, I'm just going to give golf a crack and then qualify automatically to get your card, because it's not easy, is it? It's not easy.
No, it's not easy.
Card.
No, it really isn't. There's only 30 cards every year from all the players that go. And yeah, maybe it was luck. Maybe it is. You know how it is when you kind of pick up the clubs after you've stopped playing for a while and you don't carry that baggage of like, oh, I missed that putt yesterday and I sliced it right there and all of these kind of things. Maybe it was a bit of that. Maybe it was just no pressure because I really did go without any expectation. So there was probably some learnings there that I should have carried into my professional career. It was a combination of potentially, luck and and a bit of a muscle memory that might have helped me through it.
You were on the tour, I think, for four seasons, if I'm not mistaken, 2001 through to 2005. What are some of your favorite highlights when you look back of during that time? Did it always feel like it wasn't quite for you, or what was your kind of end takeaway from your time on the tour?
So for me personally, I said I turned pro, and just as a, in my mind, it wasn't going to be my kind of long-term career. I love the game. I'm passionate about the game. I enjoyed playing it, but I didn't see myself as that being kind of my, for me personally, my career future, long-term future. So it was always something, as other opportunities, came up or were happening, I was always interested and curious about them. But I think when I was playing, and I will say it probably is the hardest job ever, but it is the most the kind of the most special, like the best job I've ever had, as hard as it was, to be honest, in kind of that the challenge of trying to perform at the highest level every week, and it's within your hands. I mean, and that's what golf really is. You personally with the golf ball and trying to do the best, and how frustrating and then how rewarding just one shot might be within the context of your career. It's an emotional roller coaster, but there's not many things that give you that sort of level of emotional attachment as trying to compete as an elite athlete, I think.
Yeah. No, I mean, I wouldn't know, unfortunately, but I can only imagine how, I guess it takes a special kind of person, and someone who, I suppose the one thing that a lot of golfers admit to is that they look back on their time, as certainly golfers who have finished their playing days, they look back and go, well, I was extremely self-absorbed because everything had to revolve around my career and my aspirations. And some people just aren't cut out to be that sort of egocentric in a way, to be that single-minded and to block out everything else in life that gets in the way of them playing their best golf.
I mean, it is. I mean, as I say, my professional career was quite short, and obviously went. I know took another path soon after. But to be able to persevere, to make a living from it, to be successful at it, it is one of the things of the hardest thing. It is lonely. It's very lonely. It's very tough. It's you, and if it doesn't go right, you're the only one to blame. Sports people are really, really tough on themselves, and absolutely that mental strain, but that mental commitment is what is required to be able to succeed, and it's tough.
What about the way that your playing days have informed your role in the administrative side of things? Because I think 2008 you joined as the executive director of the LET, and you did 4 years before going on to some other business interests of your own. But did that kind of did playing on the tour and getting the insight of what it was like to be a professional golfer, did that inform how you viewed the sort of leadership qualities of what was required when it comes to taking the tour in the right direction?
Yeah, I would say so. So no, I joined as a CEO in 2005, so pretty much was straight off the golf course into the role, because I was on the board previous to that, and I was there for almost 8 years. So it was, and I would say absolutely, having been inside the ropes helped me then and still helps me now. It's, it is difficult, because I guess the biggest thing is people that work in sports are often in awe of the sports or the athletes or the glamour side of what is portrayed. And everybody thinks that, footballers or tennis players have the perfect life. They're traveling the world, but that's only like the minuscule number of athletes that really make it there. There is a whole load of potentials that don't quite ever get to that level, and their stories are the ones that are make up the game genuinely, because it's so few that do absolutely live the perfect life, and kind of understanding that, it gives context to what the Ladies European Tour is actually about. And what we're actually about is to try and give the widest platform possible for as many players possible to try and make a living from their own talent from competing in golf. And that I think is something that, it has to always be present in what we do. There's all the other elements. There is a lot of glamour. There is a lot of traveling. But to the core of it, we're just a vehicle for these players to be able to be the best they can be.
Yeah, you've kind of answered my next question, because I was going to ask for your overall vision for the Ladies European Tour. Has it been consistent, Alex, since you sort of, obviously, as you say, you've been involved with the tour for so many years now? Has it evolved with the times? Has it been something, a mantra that you've kind of held up there for an awfully long time?
From my perspective, and obviously I was there, and then there's this in between, there's probably about 8 years that I wasn't involved, and it may have had a slightly different direction then. From my involvement then and my kind of returning back to the tour now, it is very much about what the core is. There is all these other elements that we have to bring into the mix about, television coverage and maximizing other opportunities through commercial revenues, media and digital, and giving these players a profile. But all that leads to just growing the tour, so ultimately our players can make the best living possible. So if we don't keep that core, everything else can get very distracting. But if you don't have kind of what is that all feeding back to, then it's very easy to lose your way and say, oh, well, we've got great numbers in our media platforms, but if it's not feeding back to growing actually the tour and the game and the playing opportunities, then it's not really progressing us as a tour.
How much has the tour changed in the 20 years since you played on it back in 2001 to where it's at right now? Obviously, a lot has happened, particularly in the last couple of years, that have affected things greatly. But how much has the tour changed? And women's sport in general has made great strides in those last 20 years. Obviously, we've seen with things like football and the huge levels of interest in the FIFA Women's World Cup a couple of years ago really did just, I think it spoke to a real kind of milestone for women's sport. Is golf capitalizing on that momentum, would you say?
Yeah, so kind of the two sides to that question. I think, how has golf changed in the last 20 years? It's changed a lot. I mean, I think from the perspective, it's become a lot more global. We're not only playing everywhere around the world, but also the players themselves are coming from lots of new different countries that before didn't even have golf courses or players. So the globalization of the game at the highest level. And I think that the second one, obviously, we've become a lot more professional. There's a lot more understanding. The golf courses, the quality of the golf courses have all developed. So the game itself has all progressed. And I would say the second question was about the women's sports. I think the growth in women's sports is an understanding that, it's a social change, isn't it? And to a certain extent, yeah. It's societal that has helped us a lot. In the perception of the world has to change and realize that women are a key part of society. We are 50%. That in the workplace there is a movement to that equality. And I think the more that is being integrated into sports, the more that we have visibility in women's sports, say with women's soccer, that people are starting to realize, like, oh wow, we're not kind of bad athletes, or there is this just, I guess, understanding in general that women's sport is not as good, they're not as athletic, there is not worth watching. And I think the fact that we get that more visible is showing and making people change their mind. I think, the Women's World Cup England team, for the women's team, when they played, they just, everybody kind of was really cheering for the first time, and I don't think anyone thought it's like, oh, well, it's women's football, it's just like, it's England and they're doing really well. So I think all of that has helped. So there's a mixture of societal, the corporate world also appreciating it, and a general understanding of how good women's sports is.
There's a tribalism, certainly in men's football, that has existed for years. And what I found really interesting about the Women's World Cup, to come back to that, was, the example of the US player Alex Morgan, taking the mick out of the England team by it was such a small thing, but it had huge media coverage when she simulated that she was drinking tea after scoring against England. It seemed to send the entire UK into a tailspin. And I thought it was really interesting because that's not what you would typically associate with female sports stars. You wouldn't associate that kind of level of competitive aggression or needle, or even if it's just something as seemingly trivial as just doing a celebration like that. When you have someone like Megan Rapinoe making very outspoken remarks at award ceremonies and actually being quite aggressive in underlining the points that she feels that, you know, women's sport is continually demeaned in that respect. That's important. And yet that's a whole cultural shift, isn't it? And I suppose female sports stars can play their own part in sort of forcing that shift over the line.
I mean, so it is important to have, you know, and I understand not everybody is suited for it or wants to be kind of in the limelight and take the burden of pushing the bar for equality in their sport or women's sports. But some athletes, you know, as you say, Alex and Megan and you know, Serena Williams, they're kind of said, okay, we'll take it on. We'll you know, move the bar. And I think that it does help when the athletes are outspoken. And I think, you know, as you say, the tea drinking kind of it happens all the time. That kind of banter in sports. In men's sports, it's kind of more accepted. You say it maybe took people by surprise, but the fact that people reacted to it, it just showed how much it meant. You know, normally they would be doing like, oh, dismissive, or did you hear, you know, like a side comment. But the fact that people were impassioned because of that, it just showed that it was really reaching people, you know, more than just, you know, a kind of side comment. They were actually invested in the game.
And the Solheim Cup has had a couple of instances of that as well, where, you know, that there has been competition as intense as it is, has really kind of bubbled to a sort of boiling point. I'm sure when those instances have happened, Alex, you've noticed a massive spike in interest in sort of media viewership figures and kind of general kind of, if you would like, impressions, you know, interest in the game, eyeballs on the game. I'm sure those moments have really kind of been catalysts in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, so it's you know, sometimes good for, you know, the reasons like Suzanne Petterson making that putt on the last hole of the last day to win the Solheim Cup versus, you know, a ruling controversy or but you know, all of those things just then transcend just the kind of the golfing fan and go into the sports fan. And I know so many people that never even watched golf or even know any of the players. So there's no that they did watch that Solheim Cup on that final day when they started to kind of understand what was going on and how close it was. And that's, you know, that's where team things like by nationality help, because you already have a side. So, you know, if you don't know the players, it's a lot harder. But if you know, if it's kind of you know, if you're European or American or whether it's you know, a national that you'll look for your flag and be like, oh, you know, I'll support that player. Then that it always helps to get, you know, a lot more people just buy into it.
How much has social media changed things? Because obviously the players now are they are their own promotional agents. They're not relying on a platform to do the promoting for them. They're not relying as much on sponsors, although I'm sure they're continuing to be very important as part of the sort of players' overall profile. The fact is that they can now jump on Instagram, Twitter, etc., and they can say what's on their mind. They can paint the picture that they want to paint of themselves and their careers and their lives as well. How much has that empowerment changed the popularity of women's sport and the kind of elevation of these stars onto the pedestal that I think is important for really kind of inspiring youngsters to take up the game?
I think, I mean, for women's sports, I think it's hugely important, and it has been a game changer to a certain extent. You know, the biggest challenge why women's sports struggle with sponsorship or events is because we just struggle to deliver the media value that is dominated by men's sports. And I think still the coverage on television of female sports versus male sports is, you know, huge disparity. And obviously, to be able to get the investment into the game, you're going to have a lot more visibility. in the traditional mediums like television, we're still going to be quite a long way down the pecking order to get the coverage. But with new technologies, with social media, digital platforms, players also being able to do their own content, that helps and evens out a little bit the ability of women's sports to get exposure without having to rely on huge costly productions and then competing with other bigger sports. I mean, it's still essential and it's still a big part, but that shift definitely helps, gives us visibility. I mean, I see even in our commercial discussions with the sponsors and with the events, it's a lot more about how do we get more digital activation. That is now, like, it is about, okay, we're having this event. Well, how can we use this to create content that is going to generate, just digital activation? It's not so much about, okay, let's get it broadcast in this and this country. It is absolutely more looking into digital platforms. So it's so that's definitely a natural shift also from also the corporate side, but it helps us as a tour to showcase ourselves without them, I guess waiting on the big TV channels to show us.
Sure. And listen, they're up against it because there's so many different platforms and so many different ways that people can consume content now that the space is becoming that much more competitive as well. But speaking of digital activations, a couple of years ago, the Lady European Tour golfers who appeared in that video at Qadiyah with the sort of landscape of Saudi Arabia, could you ever have envisaged, Alex, that the Ladies European Tour would develop such a strong partnership in Saudi Arabia, of all places, a place that had never had a professional golf tournament until a couple of years ago, that only hosted its first Saudi International men's event back in 2019. And yet here it is, one of the most significant backers, I assume, of the Ladies European Tour. Has that kind of blown your mind a little bit?
It's an interesting one. Yeah, if you'd said a few years ago, or even, probably slightly over a year, that we would become such strong partners, I probably would have, been like, really? I mean, normally these things take a little bit more time. They're only kind of, starting in golf at the moment. And but as soon as I met the team in Golf Saudi, I saw that, their passion, their belief, their vision for where they want to take Saudi Arabia, where they want to take the game, and how all this fits into a wider plan. It's not something that was just happening because of, it was the right kind of thing to do because everybody else was doing it.
It's not a publicity stunt.
No, there's definitely a plan in place, and a very well thought out plan. And as soon as I got to meet them and discuss about starting with just the one event, it felt right. It felt like we have very natural synergies. We're passionate about the game. We want to inspire new generations into the game, and that's how our players feel too. They want to grow the game. They want to make sure that the game that gives them so much, that other people have the opportunity. So it felt quite natural. Whether so quickly we'd get to this, I think it's a combination of things. Probably one being a positive on the back of COVID. There's like, is there any positives? There potentially is a few, and kind of that that relationship and that kind of bonding over those two events at the end of last year, and the reception that they had just completely blew our minds. How many people were following on the social media within Saudi Arabia, where there's I think there's 5,000 golfers, and the live stream had like 20,000 or something. It was ludicrous numbers of people watching, and the Ladies First Club, that got oversubscribed within 4 days. And I think kind of there is a natural progression there on this partnership of where we are. In a way we're still kind of the younger tour, in that we're not as established as some of the other golf tours. They want to grow the game. We have kind of that more innovative approach, and I think it just worked. So it's a combination of factors.
And just prior to that, because I know that I appreciate last year was, it was so challenging on so many levels for every single person. I think obviously we all had different experiences, but it brought challenges across the board in sport and elsewhere, and obviously in industry in general. It was a really tough year, and I know that the LET had its struggles in supporting the players, and as you mentioned, the Saudi Arabia partnership is something that was hugely positive that came out of 2020. But the year before that, there was an agreement made with the LPGA Tour, which when I see it, I think it's significant, because you imagine two rival tours, and actually something similar has happened with the European Tour and the PGA Tour in the men's game. There's been a tie-up. What motivated it from your side, Alex? That agreement with the LPGA Tour, was it to safeguard the future of the LET?
It is. I mean, and finally, it was a pre-COVID idea, and thank goodness that it did happen when it happened. I've always kind of believed that women's golf needs to be unified. One thing that golf is extremely fragmented, which never made much sense to me. And as you say, you'd think on the surface we should be competing, but we actually aren't. We never were. I mean, there is no comparison. The LPGA is established, is where it is. Its base is mainly the US. And the fact that people think that we're competing or that we would even want to compete, we're much stronger working and collaborating together, because our competitors are genuinely, other sports or other entertainment businesses where we want to try and attract sponsorship from. So, there's no point in us kind of short selling ourselves against each other, when ultimately we want those big sponsors to come to golf instead of going to football or to tennis or to wherever it is. Those are actually, where we have to position ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, what's the point of infighting, right? If, as you say, there's a lot competition among sports is as high as it's ever going to be, or it's ever been, I should say, and I'm sure it's only going to intensify. So, yeah, absolutely, stronger together. It's a shame that the UK didn't heed that advice when it comes to Brexit, but we won't talk about that.
No, exactly. No, let's not go there. Yeah.
but no, talking about how these new series, I want to know a bit more about the concept behind the team series. I know amateurs are going to be involved in that, and how will this relationship with the LPGA affect playing opportunities in what are very big money events? There's $1 million purse for these this new Aramco Team Series that's going to be launching, I think, New York, I think London, Singapore, culminating at the Royal Greens Golf Club just north of Jeddah. It's so exciting, Alex, because it's not just a new format, but it's $4 million worth of investment from Aramco and Gulf Saudi put straight into the LET. Is the LPGA going to be involved in that?
I mean, at the moment, the partnership is with the LET. Obviously, we have a close relationship with the LPGA, and the LPGA are hugely supportive and excited for this opportunity for the LET. I mean, as you said, that I didn't touch on earlier, one of the reasons why this partnership with the LPGA was to safeguard the LET, but to give playing opportunities that were dwindling for the European players. It's hugely important for the LPGA that there is still that the kind of the future talents are still able to compete at the highest level, and are still coming through, and are still making the majors, and are still playing in the Soham Cup teams, and so that was kind of because of the LET losing tournaments, that was one of the concerns. So these events are a perfect example of kind of setting the bar that much higher than the players, and it's opportunities for everyone. So basically, LET players, whether they play in the US, whether they play in Japan, wherever they can participate, and I think they'll be hugely attractive to a lot of players, and it's just going to make those tournaments that more competitive, and it is going to drive the quality of the players. So it's an integral part from as an incredible concept of 4 events in 4 continents. Amateurs getting up close and personal with the kind of the business at hand of what it is like to play these tournaments. Quite intimidating environment too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want a 6-foot putt that actually meant something for a professional. That's for sure.
Yeah,
So
so
I'm
it's
sure.
yes, it's kind of exactly. So it's going to be, it's got so many angles to it that I think it's yeah, it's exciting. So it's good for the game and it's great as a for us, but I think for the wider game of what it's going to do.
There's been a lot of talk for a long time, Alex, about how golf needs to, as you mentioned, it's fragmented from a sort of a governing perspective, but also when it comes to actually formatting, 72 hole stroke play events, not really conducive for people who have busy lives who might not necessarily have 4 hours to sit on the sofa and watch a full round of golf. So these kind of new formats that have come in, whether it be the Super Sixes or more team geared towards formats. We've seen what the Solheim Cup can do, what the Ryder Cup has done as well. That generates excitement in itself. So in terms of this format, is this a big part of golf's future, do you think?
I think there's a number of you saying it's not kind of one way is going to necessarily be right for everyone. So it is, I think the 72 hole cut, full field, that is, in the end, it's, our responsibility is to get as many players as possible to compete, because we represent a membership group, but that has to be also interacted with these new concepts and different ideas and new formats, and I think that's essential, because to be able to grow the game beyond the existing fans, it has to be slightly different. And I think that's one of the things that COVID also has brought into all sports. We have to think differently about the game. It's not going to be just so easy to pick up where we left off. We have to be more innovative. We have to look at different ways of making it appealing. I know, that the one thing most federations, in at least in Europe, because they have been allowed to play golf, participation has gone, increased incredibly on in most countries. So now they have to think about ways, once the world goes back to normal, they have to think of ways of like, how do we keep, these people that have just picked up, whether they were golfers before or they've just started, keep them engaged and not lose them again once kind of the world gets hectic again and we're all kind of back in offices. So that there is all these things that we have to all consider, that, it's easy to stay in the kind of the same momentum, same traditions while things are kind of working. But this, major shakeup is definitely leading for us to look at things differently.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, by the way. There's definitely in Dubai, there's been a huge spike of interest in golf. I know that that's been the case in the UK as well. I think people who were golfers have missed it and have realized how much it means to them. And it's also opened up a new avenue for people who've never tried it before, who can actually do in a relatively open space and a relatively safe environment, go out and try something new as well. So it's in many ways an opportunity for the game as well. Even as difficult as it's been, there are opportunities inside this sort of what I'm sure we could all agree has been a pretty torrid time.
I mean, definitely. I think it's the fact that more people are playing the game. I mean, that's that is kind of then generates more interest, then gets into hopefully also helps break some of the barriers of the game where it's been very specific socioeconomic background, and that's what the work that we have to do, is to make it more accessible, because it is a a sport breaking after those barriers that everybody can do. As you say, it is an open space. It is it's not combative. It's not physical. So some women don't want to necessarily get sweaty or physical or do contact sports. So it is a sport that allows itself in many ways to draw in lots of people from different age groups, from different backgrounds.
This format, just curious, Alex, it's 3 professionals and 1 amateur for the team event. Am I correct there?
Yes.
And what's the timeline for this? Because there's 4 events, obviously New York, London, Singapore, and then Saudi Arabia. I'm assuming the Saudi Arabia event will take place at roughly the same time of the year as it did last year, back in November.
Yes, correct.
When are the others? Have you finalized the schedule yet as to when the others will slot in?
we're working on that, but we're looking at I think it's May, July, and October.
Okay.
I think those are the kind of the months we're looking at. Yeah.
And will the teams be the same every single edition, or will that change based on qualification rights and
Yeah, initially
parameters?
at the moment, no. The conversations that we had so far is that each event, because obviously you can't guarantee it'll be exactly the same field anyway from one to the other. So it's not, so it is, but we'll look at a way of ranking the players within those 4 events. So there is a connectivity between them, but it's not the same team appearing in all 4.
Okay.
Because also, and there's difficulties whether it is, obviously they might not be able to play, or if you get an injury or whatever. So I think, there's a kind of there is still a few details and ideas that we're going to work through
Sure.
to make them, to kind of make them exciting. And I think because it is such a new concept, there's all these things that potentially will evolve as we learned a lot from the last one that we will implement, and I'm sure that there'll be things that we'll keep feeding off to make them better and better.
Before I throw my name into the hat for amateur participation into this, Alex, I'm sure I've hit the back of a very, very long queue. Is that at the discretion of the players? How are amateurs going to be selected for this? Will there be an amateur qualifying process for this?
So at we're responsible for obviously the professionals, and our partners Golf Saudi are the ones that are going to decide on how the amateurs.
I need to knock on.
So,
I need to knock on
exactly.
their door.
So you need to call them. Yeah.
I'll be hounding
I'll
them.
pass it on to them now. Yeah.
You passed the buck brilliantly there, Alex. No, that's fantastic. Listen, I can't wait to see it. I mean, I'm really looking forward to watching it, and I'm sure it's going to be high octane. I'm sure it's going to be very, very exciting as well to watch teams battle it out and to see how that unfolds, because obviously we always love watching those team events in the Solheim and the Ryder Cup. I will let you go, but I've got to ask you how the next couple of years look, Alex, in terms of an LET. It seems like this rough period, which of course we're still very much in the midst of this pandemic, that's not going to go anywhere anytime soon, but there feels like real momentum behind the LET right now, and it feels like the next couple of years are looking very, very promising. Yeah,
to be honest, I mean, besides kind of the struggles and challenges that COVID brings, just trying to put protocols in place, and obviously trying for the events to get the value of a tournament under the current restrictions. All the events that committed for last year that couldn't be played are coming back for this year. We're looking to announce the schedule at the end of next week, and it should be all going well. It should be the strongest schedule that the LET has had. So it's looking good, and everybody's very positive and coming back to many countries that we hadn't been in a long time. Some new concepts and ideas. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. So if we keep this momentum, and it should be a good few years ahead.
And I'm sure Golf Saudi very much involved at the forefront of that. It's such an exciting new announcement. I think it's going to create an awful lot of buzz, the Aramco Team Series. So congratulations on making that happen, Alex. And look forward to catching up with you, hopefully sometime soon over here in the Middle East as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you. And I can't wait till I can also get on a plane and start seeing people in person.
That's brilliant. Well, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast, Alex. It's always a pleasure having you and chatting to you. And I wish you all the luck for the rest of the season.
Thanks, Robbie.
A massive thank you to Alex Armas for joining us on the podcast. I think we can all agree, hugely exciting things happening on the horizon and right now for both women's golf and the Ladies European Tour as it pertains to their relationship with Golf Saudi, and we're excited to see how that develops. If you want to catch another episode of this podcast, just hit the subscribe button. You can follow the progress of Golf Saudi as well on golfsaudi.com. On their social media handles, it's @golf_Saudi on both Twitter and Instagram. Do make sure you subscribe. Join us on another episode of the Power of the Game podcast. Until then, we'll catch you next time.